Grand Teton has become one of America's most popular national parks, and for good reason. We wanted to see what all of the hype was about, so we decided to go live there for 2 full weeks in our RV. In preparation for visiting one of America's most popular national parks, we did some research ourselves and watched videos and read blogs on what are the top things to do, when do you do them, and just what can you do in the area in general. To our surprise though, no one seemed to mention how much visiting the Grand Tetons would cost if you were to do all of these excursions they listed out. And now these excursions included wildlife tours, photography trials and classes, zip lining, paragliding, there's even like whitewater rafting I think somewhere in there. So there really are just a ton of adventure activities that you could do that were the top recommended. But these all come at a cost that we were really surprised at when we looked into it more. And after crunching some of the numbers, it turns out that doing all of these excursions in about a week, 5 to 7 days, would cost on average over $1,000 a person. And that is just for the activities. That's not including flights, that's not including where to stay, and it's not including food either. So this could easily cost you a couple $1,000s per person for just 1 week. To put this a little more into perspective, one of the top recommended activities that's supposed to be quicker, easier, and a little cheaper involves taking a tram up to the top of the mountain, which we did do in the evening. But if you do it during the day, it is over $50 a person. And if you do it in the evening, it's only $15 a person. So in this video, we're gonna be going over ways that you can save money while visiting the Grand Tetons and still get the full experience of the national park. And while all of these activities really look like a great time, we know that we cannot personally afford to do this every single day. And we also figure that other people probably can't afford to do these things, but feel pressured like they need to. And now I just wanna clarify one thing. You can definitely do some of these excursions. You don't have to do all of them. We opted not to do any of them, and this was still our favorite national park out of all the ones we have visited so far. The number one free activity that I would recommend to you if you're visiting the Grand Teton National Park is hiking. Now, before you click away and you think this might sound boring, let me tell you from personal experience, I am not the biggest fan of hiking, or at least I wasn't before visiting Grand Teton National Park, but the trails here really are unlike anything else that I've been on. You get to see waterfalls, mountains, lakes, there's moose and bear that you can see on these hikes as well. A majority of the hiking trails in Grand Teton National Park are an easy to moderate in difficulty rating in under 5 miles. However, if you are looking to scratch that intense itch of yours, there are really intense hikes that go 20 miles up into the mountains that I have heard will take 10 plus hours. So those are always available if that's what you're looking for. Some of our top recommendations are going to be the Taggart Lake Trail, Lakeshore Trail at Coulter Bay, and Inspiration Point in Cascade Canyon. All these you can do if you are in a decent hiking shape. They're not anything crazy intense. However, just a fair warning, Inspiration Point is a bit uphill and up some stairs for the first half mile or so, but then it does flatten out after that. If you are interested more into these trails and how we did them and our experiences with them, I'll link our video here and you can watch more on that later. We did also do many more hikes other than these 3. Pretty much every day we went on a hike for almost 2 weeks. These are just our top recommendations. If you do want other recommendations on the hiking trails, depending on the area you're staying in, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer all of those for you. The second money-saving activity that we're gonna be recommending to you today is driving the Grand Teton National Park loop. In total, this is a 42-mile loop that goes through pretty much the highlights of the national park and can be completed in 1 to 2 hours if you're driving it straight. However, would recommend doing some of the stops as you will have some of the best views you'll see in your life. And depending on how many stops you take and how long you stay out there, it can take upwards to 3 to 4 hours if you're taking your time. And on this loop, there are countless overlook points that you can see mountains, you can see prairies, possibly wildlife. There's also historical markers that have a little plaque that are just kind of fun to read and get more information on the area before it became a national park. Now, because this is a 42-mile road, we do have a couple more recommendations than in the previous one. Our personal favorite stops were Oxbow Bend, Blacktail Pond, Signal Mountain, and Schwabacher Landing. We really enjoyed Oxbow Bend because it has one of the best views of the river you'll get in the entire national park. When you pull up, there's probably going to be people there, as there was every time we drove to it. You just have this huge, basically 180 view of the river and all the mountains in the background. It's also a pretty popular place that we've heard to view elk and moose. We did see elk there. We didn't end up seeing any moose at Oxbow Bend, but we did see them in the park, which we'll get to later on in the video. Now, Blacktail Pond is supposedly the best place that you have to view wildlife, as it does have all 5 natural resources that the animals need to thrive the most for shelter and habitat and other things like that. We stopped here twice and unfortunately didn't see any wildlife at all. But people we talked to while we were visiting there twice did say that they have seen many wildlife there, and it is a great spot to go see wildlife. And you can see bear, moose, deer, elk, bison there. We just happened to have poor timing with our wildlife viewing and didn't get to see any. but it does sound like this is a reliable spot to see wildlife, especially at sunrise and sunset. Now, Signal Mountain is the highest point that you can drive to on this loop, and when you get up to it, it is a different view than everything else that you will stop at on this loop. You are on one of the shorter mountains, and therefore you're looking out over the prairie into Grand Teton National Park, not at the mountains, which is really cool because you can just see how vast the Jackson Hole area really is. And you'll most likely be able to see bison and elk really far away, so bring your binoculars if you want some wildlife viewings. And the last spot on this loop that we're going to talk about in this video is Schwabacher Landing, which is probably the least known spot out of all four that we're going to be going over today. This location was really cool because on most of the viewpoints you are on this main road and you just kind of pull up on the road. But with Schwabacher Landing, you actually drive down a dirt road down the hill to the river. And what I really like about it, and just said, you are off the road, so you don't get the traffic and annoyance of having the cars drive by. You get to just kind of experience the park, and it's really quiet and really nice, especially at sunset, where you can see the sun setting over the mountains, get that perfect reflection in the river, and it really is just a beautiful sight and would definitely recommend going here. The third top thing to do for free in Grand Teton National Park is going and looking at all the historical buildings and sites on the Grand Teton Loop. Now, while this may not sound as exciting to some of you, it is important to note that Grand Teton was not always a national park, and there were countless people who lived here, and these historical sites go through what their life looked like and how the area transitioned from being their homestead to a national park. These include the really iconic Mormon barns, which are the most photographed barns in the world. And if you've ever looked up a picture of the Grand Teton National Park, chances are you've seen a picture of this barn. There's also a small area called Menor's Ferry District, which goes over the history of a man who basically built the only ferry business in all of the area by crossing this river and made a lot of money. However, he was cranky and had some conflict with the customers, but I'll let you read on that when you get there. And there's also two religious buildings that you can visit while in the national park. One is the Chapel of the Transfiguration, and the other one is Chapel of the Sacred Heart. And fun fact, Chapel of the Sacred Heart is the only building that is dedicated to being a Catholic church year-round that is on national park ground. All the other religious buildings are rented actually throughout the country. In our opinion, all these spots are definitely worth stopping at. It's nice because they break up the drive and you get to learn something other than just looking at wildlife and hearing things from your guides. You get to learn a little more about the history, which is always fun to know. The fourth best money-saving thing to do in the Grand Tetons is actually the only thing on this list that's going to cost you money. I know, sorry about that, but just hear me out, and it is going to be visiting the local happenings and music festivals in the Jackson Hole area. When we first arrived to Grand Teton National Park and visited Jackson, which is the town right outside of Grand Teton National Park, we were a little shocked, to say the least, at how touristy and how busy this town really is. I mean, we were coming from the Badlands, which had basically no signs of life, on our way over through Custer, and now we are in Jackson, which is a very developed and popular area, and there were hotels, there were apartments, there was just people everywhere, and we were a little surprised at first. But the more we looked into it, the more we realized that Jackson is a little more than just a touristy town. Don't get me wrong, it does have its fair share of t-shirt stores where they all sell you the same t-shirt, but there were a lot more local stores selling more unique handcrafted goods, in our opinion, than we've seen at other touristy towns. And with all these people in the area, there did tend to seem a little more activity with like local happenings like music festivals and just performances in the street. So if you're looking for an evening activity, just walking through the town of Jackson will be more than entertaining enough to suit your needs. And you can always stop and get ice cream and sit under the iconic archways made of antlers in the park, where you can get your Instagram picture and show everyone that you did actually go to Grand Teton and Jackson Hole area. But now, if you want an area that's a little more away from the crowds and a little more local and just authentic, we're gonna recommend to you our favorite thing we did in the Grand Teton National Park that wasn't hiking. Located at Dornan's area, there is this really cool music event called the Hootenanny. Basically what this is a really small music pavilion stage area at the Dornan's campgrounds, where local artists and tourists coming in who can play music sign up and audition, I'm sure, to some extent. And then they get to perform 2 songs on stage in front of the crowd, and then they get kicked off for the next person to come in. It was a really unique way to hear a whole bunch of different local artists and music. Some are cover bands, and a lot of them write their own music, which is just cool to hear the different styles and people's skills that they really have. This occurs every Monday night during the summer months, don't know the exact dates, and we actually enjoyed it so much that we went both Mondays that we were staying in Grand Teton National Park and just really enjoyed ourselves each time we went. And the best part is that going to the Hootenanny is free. It's just kind of in an outdoor sitting area. Bring your lawn chairs if you're gonna go. There isn't a ton of seating, but they do sell beer and things there, which obviously you have to pay for, and it's just kind of a good way to support the local area because they don't ask for admission tickets to get into the Hootenanny. But like I just said, this is a really cool experience, and I strongly recommend you going. I mean, how often do you get to listen to live music from local artists with the Grand Teton mountain range in the background. Number 5 and last thing on the list that we're going to be talking about today of ways to save money while visiting the Grand Tetons kind of blends in with everything that we have already talked about, and that is going to be wildlife photography and viewing just throughout the park in general. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, there are elk, moose, bear, black bear, grizzly bear, foxes, squirrels, and a bunch of tiny other little animals that you can see in the park that really make the experience a lot more authentic and a lot more in the wild and a lot more nature than most people get in their everyday lives. Now, viewing wildlife does kind of tie in with everything else, which is why I'm bringing it up last, and we did see most of our wildlife while going on hikes, while doing the Grand Teton Loop. Believe it or not, there isn't a ton of wildlife in Jackson Town, but there is an elk refugee camp where you can kind of go through and look at, see how that all works. But if this is something that you're really interested in, and I believe most people are, we're gonna be going over 3 tips very shortly that are going to increase your chances of viewing wildlife in Grand Teton National Park. Number 1 thing to do to increase your chance of viewing wildlife is go into the park ranger stations and ask the park rangers if they have seen any recent activity of wildlife sightings, or if they just know where the wildlife tend to be, such as the bison. They can track pretty well. They'll tell you pretty much where they are located. But then also the moose and the black bear, they probably won't tell you where they're at. However, they may tell you where they like to live, the type of habitats, and when they're most active. Just kind of tips you can go out and increase your chances of viewing. It is also very important when you're doing any hiking in this area that you bring bear spray. I'll put a link in the description on where you can get yours. It's about $50 a can, which may seem a little expensive. However, $50 to save your life is a pretty good deal. The second tip that I'm going to give you is when you do have a better idea of where these animals like to live, you're going to want to go as early as you can in the day, pretty much when the sun rises, because it gets very hot in the 90s every day, pretty much in Grand Teton in the summer, which is too hot for most people to be outside, and it's too hot for most of the animals to really be moving around. We learned that the animals are very active in the mornings when they are just waking up and they have light and it's not too hot out, and then also in the evenings. However, sometimes the evenings can get changed based off of like the cloudiness and the temperature of the day, but the mornings are usually pretty consistent with animal activity from our experiences. And our third tip for you is to simply just be patient. These animals are wild, they're not trained, they don't have a schedule other than their natural instincts, so really just be patient and know that wildlife viewing is not guaranteed, even if you're on a tour where they may say they guarantee wildlife. It's also important to note that a lot of wildlife viewing just in any national park or any area in the country, not just Grand Teton, does have a large bit to do with luck and just being in the right place at the right time. We were very lucky in our visit at Grand Teton, and we were able to see 10 different moose throughout 2 weeks, which from what we have heard is very lucky to see that many in that short of a time, so we did feel very blessed in that. And if you don't have a fancy scope or binoculars or camera to take pictures of these, don't worry, we got pretty close to most of these animals, and pretty much all the videos and pictures that I'm showing you in this video here today we're taking with our phone cameras, which is pretty cool that we were able to do it that well. To wrap up this video and our final thoughts, Grand Teton has become one of our favorite national parks and just locations to visit as a whole, and we didn't even do any of the fancy and expensive excursions that you can do, such as like rock climbing, via ferrating, paragliding. I'm sure these experiences would enhance your stay, but they're definitely not needed for you to enjoy Grand Teton National Park. In our opinion, having a limit on what you can spend should not be the factor on whether you go to national parks or not. There are always countless activities that you can do in the national parks for free, like hiking and sightseeing, that are definitely worth going and see the national park just to do these things. Really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want other tips on other national parks like Badlands or Yellowstone, be sure to let me know in the comments, and I'll probably be making videos in the future on how you can save money just in pretty much any national park that we go to. Thanks for watching.